Let me see here. I need to share a screen. Not that one. Here we go. This one. So my name is Nick Malone. I guess I should talk about myself since I said I wasn't going to introduce myself earlier. There's a URL before I introduce myself at the top of all of my slides. If you have questions while I'm talking, just go there and type your question. I'll address it either when I get time or if it makes sense for where I'm at the moment, I'll start talking about it then. This will be fine. So where I wanted to start was where basically Sarah had ended. She talked a lot about, different technologies, all of these different routes and reasons that you would want to use them, what you have to think about as you're considering what technologies are appropriate for the agency that you're a part of, for the budget that you're a part of, for the use cases that you're a part of. But there's a lot more that goes into technology use, right? There's a great debate. I won't bring it up, but basically there are hundreds of thousands of pages written about computer science education. And the basic lesson that comes out of all of them is none of us can remember how we learned how to read. How are we supposed to teach people how to write programs, use technologies in this way if we don't remember what it was like to actually learn them in the first place? And so we keep, I guess I'm speaking from the inverse side where Sarah is talking about emergency management adopting technology. I'm going to talk a little bit about technologists constructing technology to be used for emergency management. Now, to get back to who I am, my name is Nick Malone. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. My college is the College of Information Science and Technology, but my background is in sociology. I'm in an iSchool, and what the iSchools are meant to do is to bring together social scientists and technologists to get together and actually find solutions to either problems caused by technology or problems that can be maybe aided by technology. At current, my emergency management realm is I'm working with Chet Hunter, who's the current IAEM president for Region 7. I'm the sort of Nebraska representative, and I'm outreach for this particular region. And I'm also working with the Emerging Technology Committee of IAEM. And so I guess I'm also working for the Higher Education Symposium. If you, throughout the course of this class, want to submit something, maybe a poster or a paper to a higher education symposium and go to maybe Emmitsburg where the Emergency Management Institute is, let me know. I can help with whatever it is that you might need. So moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about maybe use cases, ways that technology can be abused, sort of barriers to integration, and the kind of force needed to get folks who maybe don't know what YouTube is or how to get a video up on YouTube. How can I force them to learn how to type or to learn how to record videos? So the easiest way for me to kind of talk about technology from the technologist's perspective Sarah is posting some information that is very necessary over there. Sarah's pulling up chat. Is the term crisis informatics. So technically, I am the first generation of iSchool PhD people to go out as a crisis informatics researcher. And what is crisis informatics, you might ask? I still don't really know, but the easiest way to define that is that it is looking at how information communication technology, right? That sort of underlying structure that allows Internet of Things, internet communication, text messaging, cell phone use, email, social media. How does that actually interact with emergency management? And along those lines, we look at each individual disaster as a way for us to maybe deepen our understanding of how technology and emergency management interact with one another. Now, the sort of case that interested me and kind of supercharged a lot of what it was that we were doing, was this earthquake in 2011 in Virginia. And what this little movie is showing you is that within 4 seconds, somebody had tweeted, "Oh my God, there was an earthquake." This is faster than any of the tools that were in use at the time on Google. So USGS updates, where are the earthquakes? They updated slower than the first person who was tweeting. Now, the issue with this is pretty straightforward, but it might not make a lot of sense at first. And that is, during a disaster, so much information is created. So much information is created that you have to sift through it with some sort of automated means. And so this was one of the most eye-opening moments for me. I basically was a new PhD student at Penn State. My advisor said, "Here's a computer scientist. His name is Hyun-Woo Kim. I want you to sit down with Hyun-Woo, and I want you to go through the data that he collected from the Boston Marathon bombing. And I want you to figure out some questions you can ask of the data, verify that that information you're asking is worthwhile, and move forward." And he pulled out his data set and he said, "I have 100 million tweets, and it's in our high performance computing cluster, which is basically a supercomputer. We can ask anything that you want of it. But for right now, it has to be a yes or a no question. I've cleaned the data down. I removed all unique. I got all of the retweets and things out, and I've cleaned that 100 million down to 20 million, so 19.6 million. And so he and I sat in that room with no windows or anything for 7 straight days, trying to figure out what we could actually ask of this data. And so if you're talking about, new technology use, even though I was pretty tech savvy, I'm suddenly in a room with somebody who has so much information that I don't know what I can ask. And every question I would say, "I want to know the answer to this," he'd say, "We can't ask in that way." And so 7 days straight, and all of our common ground, our decision processes on how to work with these data, all of this occurred on the 7th day. And we were so tired by the end of it that we didn't speak for a month after this. And what we ended up coming up with was, during the Boston Marathon bombing and the investigation that came after it, there were 2 groups that were trying to identify who the bomber was, and that was Anonymous and Reddit. Anonymous was pursuing this idea that there was a false flag operation going in there, and we'll come back to that. What Reddit was doing was trying to identify who the bomber was, because the FBI did what the FBI does, and they said, "Can the public help us?" And they opened up a tip line that allowed people to send data to it. And from what I've been able to put together, the FBI got about 7 petabytes of data in the course of like 3 or 4 days. And what a petabyte is, like, let's say my phone has 512 gigabytes on it. A petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. Just imagine, I don't know how else I can talk about this without getting into math. It's a lot. We'll just say it's a lot. And they had no capabilities to actually go through that much data at once. However, Reddit had been, right after the Aurora shootings in Colorado, had started to shift what their platform was capable of from gathering information to gathering information in real time and analyzing it and providing actionable intelligence to anybody who was interested in it. And so throughout the Boston Marathon bombing, the media began to turn towards Reddit more than public information officers or public officers of any kind. And it was a fantastic thing to view from our data set perspective. Discussion about Reddit throughout the course of these 10 days that we were gathering data, they mentioned Reddit 39,000 times or 14,000 times. So that amount of information required us to, basically take this huge amount of data that we collected, and we were basically picking out like a couple of potato chips from the bag that might taste good. Now, The interesting thing that happened with Sunil Tripathi and Mike Mulugata was that Reddit's investigative capabilities had a sort of chain that they would go through, where one analyst would look at it, it would get sent on and verified, it would get sent on and verified, it would get sent on and verified. And what Reddit had been trying to do with a lot of this stuff was to essentially replicate OSINT, or they were replicating sort of verification from analysts. And at one point or another, from everything that we could tell, this organization called Poll, which factors into a whole lot of things after this event that have to do with misinformation and disinformation in the midst of disaster, seems to have infiltrated what Reddit was doing, fed these two names, verified them on the behalf of Reddit, and then the media began to pick up on these. Now, if you don't know what happened with the Boston Marathon bombing, Sunil Tripathi and Mike Mulugata, their names appeared because they were, quote unquote, mentioned on the police scanner. Kate Starbird, myself, a whole bunch of us that were doing work in the Boston Marathon bombing, we've listened to this dozens, if not hundreds of times now. We've never seen these names. These names originate from one tweet, and they somehow got involved with what Reddit was doing, and they end up causing Reddit and the crowd and crowd-based sort of investigation to be completely destroyed. And the interesting part about this, and the reason I'm kind of talking about it for a while, is that misinformation, the study of misinformation and all of that stuff begins here, right? This is where we saw something occur. And so like a conversation I had with Kate Starbird at Penn State in 2014, we talked about this event, and she went from this and started to look at when it occurred in other places and how it's occurred since then. And so when we're talking about abuse cases of information technologies, this is a huge one. There is a group of actors out there who will do everything they can to create a new disaster on top of the one you're already responding to. And so when you're using technology and trying to figure out what technologies you want, this is a huge thing you need to worry about. So what it comes down to is crisis informatics and the work that we've been doing in crisis informatics and trying to create systems that emergency management can use. We're stuck with where computer science is right now. We have to analyze the data after it's created. So I was looking at Boston Marathon bombing data some 6-7 months after it occurred. Hyun Woo, who had created this really amazing Twitter scraper, he essentially replicated, and I should add illegally, the Twitter fire hose. And so we were basically hammering Twitter's system to the point where we eventually got ourselves banned. But this ecosystem is fragile, and it's fragile because every single step of us pulling data from Twitter, we have to clean that data in some way so that we can start to glean information from it. And when we talk about gleaning information, we're talking about transforming the data in such a way that a computer, who is the most literal and like unable to improvise object ever created, it has to be told exactly what to look for. So these complex dependencies, so for our Twitter data, we had something like 30 or 40 additional things that had to be brought in to examine our data. So we had to be able to separate, when we pulled in data, usernames. We had to be able to examine what URLs were being used, what hashtags were used. We had to look at how many different times certain accounts would be communicating. Every single point along the way, something could fail. And so one of the things Sarah and I talked about when we were talking about how to communicate technology things is that a long time ago, especially in the 90s, when you had things like Windows Vista or Windows 2000, these sort of unstable operating systems, technologists went to emergency management and said, hey, check out what this can do. But at the time, you know, my phone, when it got a call, could suddenly force my keyboard to start typing for whatever reason. Or it might I might accidentally move the mouse, which then will set off this chain reaction related to screensavers that will crash that entire system. The hardware related to technology, we are able to make sure that everything looks great. This is what UX has allowed us to do. But what UX does is hides the computer from you in an effort to make it easier to use. If any portion of that stuff behind the UX crashes, that product is useless because you can't use it anymore. And so when we talk about how much of a dependency, how much we have to worry about when we're working with this much data at once, 99% of your time is going to be spent on data cleansing. Once you clean your data and get it to where you're at, yeah, gigabytes, it requires even more stuff. And the thing with like machine learning or artificial intelligence or information retrieval comes all the way down here to training optimization. In order for us to create artificial intelligence or machine learning that emergency management can use, we need to have a data set that allows us to predefine all of the potential outcomes we're going to have from our data. And the thing about disaster is disasters are always extremely local, which means that if I have training data that comes from Orange, Texas, where nobody actually speaks English and pretends like they do, we're never going to be able to understand if somebody's talking or how they're talking or what they're talking about, right? It's like talking to that guy from King of the Hill. And so these are the things these are the roadblocks that have kept crisis informatics from really having something that's attractive to emergency management in any way, shape, or form. And so I am the first generation of these particular researchers, but if I look at my parents, they've been failing for over 15 years and have gotten absolutely no traction whatsoever. We know that there's capabilities and potential to it, but we don't know how. And so this is kind of a discussion of like in the weeds. Why is it that computer technology is so hard to use? We often blame emergency managers. Well, they don't know how to use YouTube. They don't know how to use social media. But on the flip side of this, from my perspective and sort of where my work begins, what would it actually take to get these types of people to use these products? And almost universally, it is that they are so complicated to actually get going and using properly that it's just not worth the time. And so this is where I've sort of began the pandemic. I was like, okay, so the thing that I got hired to do has been failing for 15, 20 years now, depending on where you're at, because crisis informatics sort of begins with the study of the World Trade Center disaster and BlackBerry usage, just to bring that back up. So what would it actually take? And so I've been examining this, talking to people, getting more involved with emergency management, getting into Advanced Academy and doing all of these things, getting my CEM so that I can go and become a better sort of creator of technologies for emergency management. And one of the things that I've sort of been coming down to lately, and I guess I need to wrap this up relatively quickly, so we're going to skip some stuff, is that we need the right mindset. And the thing that comes out of this, because I teach a course on management, basic management of technical firms, is that in the United States, we have a very different mindset than other places might have. And the study of how Japan and the United States differ in their approach to technology is something that I keep coming back to with the evaluation of technology for emergency management. So this is sort of the takeaway from this talk. And I'm going to go to this too long didn't read slide. I can give you these slides, a link to these slides should you want them. Essentially, we'll go back to this. This very bottom line, how can we design systems that improve organizational performance, right? In Japan and Japanese managers will look at what technologies will aid existing practice and make it more efficient. And so they will work with designers to make computer systems that actually begin with how practice originates. In the United States, and this is where a lot of our failure begins, and this is a lot of the sort of unspoken truth for all of the crisis informatics stuff I was just talking about, we created this amazing technical system that could scrape Twitter in real time, and we had an ability to actually gather these data and provide intelligence from them. This is what we had been developing. And our expectation, and the expectation of all the researchers that I worked with until I graduated, was that since the system is great, y'all in emergency management need to adopt it and use it because we said so. And that mindset doesn't work. This is a source of constant frustration that I hear from emergency management. Constantly is just saying these technologists came and said, I'm going to revolutionize your life, blockchain. And you're like, but what does it do? What is it? And no one knows, but it's going to solve and fix everything. And so when we get down to it, the mindset doesn't matter. Well, we've been essentially talking around this idea that there is a gap between consumer culture that is completely dependent on this and emergency management culture, which is completely dependent on this. And how do we actually get these two groups together? Because if I, as a person in a disaster, have this device, I'm going to start texting my friends before I call 911 because probably phone lines won't work, but data lines will. And I might send out tweets. I'll reactivate all of my social media accounts and start saying I'm trapped under building 7. Please help me. I can't move my arms and I need to scratch my face. Something like that. And so what we're at right now is, if this mindset problem is the thing that is keeping technology from entering into emergency management, then we essentially are trying to imagine a future that can't exist because of this sort of origination of thought for the creation of these technologies. And so when we're talking about what the future is, for all of you who are in this class, figuring out what technologies might actually work for what you want to do is a tremendous task. It's not simple. And this sort of, there's this growing idea, because in the technical fields, we don't know what to do anymore, right? We're in this world of social media. We're in this like weird plateau where computers are just going to keep getting a little bit faster, but not faster than as they used to be. Data lines are starting to kind of fracture a lot right now. Misinformation, abuse, all of these different things are starting to happen online. And we're like, how do we fix any of this stuff? What do we do about any of that? And so what we've been doing, and how kind of the way that we're talking about this and how we're going to get there, are sort of fictional accounts. And so this is the thing that me and some of my colleagues have been doing, is trying to write fictional accounts of an emergency management in the future that uses technology in a way that it augments existing processes. And if we can augment all of these processes and show exactly where technology can fit, then technologists can actually begin to try to realize what those visions are. And so you, as new people in this space, are not confined, are not polluted by like adherence to ICS or adherence to existing practice. As new people entering this field, you have new ideas, and they'll be removed from you as you get further into the field. So for right now, as you become more acclimated to emergency management, this is an opportunity for you to think about, what could be the future in this world and how could we do it? So nobody sent me any questions, but I'll stop here and ask for questions and comments.